Hey, good evening. It's Valerie Ling, clinical psychologist, director, founder for the Center for Effective Living. It's Friday today. Isn't that just awesome? The weekend tomorrow, and I'm just looking forward. I don't know what you're doing for your weekend, but in my home, this Saturday has been a designated veg out day. It's likely to mean staying in pajamas all day, quite possibly. It could mean having dessert for breakfast and breakfast for lunch. It could mean just sitting, reading, whatever. It's a veg out day tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to it. Now, this video has got a little bit of self-disclosure coming your way. What is self-disclosure? Self-disclosure is actually when somebody peels back their public self and tells you a little bit about what really goes on inside of them. Typically, you don't do this in public very much. You tend to self-disclose to people whom you trust, whom you feel safe to be vulnerable with, and whom you can actually, whom you have a bit of a history with. And the more that you self-disclose, the more that you get to know someone, and the more that that it indicates that your trust levels are going up. My self-disclosure today is coming, I think, more from a position of advocacy. Yes, for advocacy, to really talk about what I believe. It's my second last day of live vlogging every day on the weekday. Did have a cough today as well. And I had the great privilege of being in my private practice today. So we're a group private practice. There are 4 psychologists, 2 lovely admin staff who support us psychologists in our work, a host of other services that make our work happen. And I had the real honor today of really just being in the back seat for a couple of hours as the other psychologist was working, and I was introducing a new administrative assistant into some of our functions. And I say that it was a privilege because I actually love to just sit and watch how other people who have a passion for mental health, how they do their thing, right? I call that the artistry. Excuse me. When I was training to be a psychologist, one of the things that we were taught to be is to call what they say the scientist practitioner. That is, as a practitioner, what you do is actually informed by science. But my supervisor at the time also said to me, but there's one more thing, Valerie, and that's something that we can't teach. When it comes to the healing profession, psychology and counseling, there's an artistry to it. The artist comes out because they've got all of that knowledge in their head, but it's really the artist that comes out and connects with the person and just sees the beauty and the possibility in front of them. And I love sitting back as a practice owner and watching my different members of our group practice show that or display that in front of me. And it's really something very special. And as I was sitting taking the back seat today, someone walked in and was actually seeing one of the team, but wanted to know who that practice owner was. And I found myself actually reluctantly coming to the front, not because I didn't want to introduce myself, but because I was just enjoying being in the backdrop so much. And when I actually did come forth to reveal that it was me that they were talking to, I found myself actually talking more about my group private practice than I did about myself. And it occurred to me that this is actually something that I wanted to share to you as a community, Center for Effective Living, and to, I guess, in general, as an advocate for mental health, is that it really does take more than one of us to go the distance. What I found myself saying today in terms of introducing myself is to say that actually, really, truly, the private practice is made up of the people who belong in this collective. We support one another. We sharpen one another. You don't see what goes on behind the scenes, but we do challenge one another I welcome challenge, though it might sometimes take me a little while to rise to the occasion, excuse me, to be mature to receive that challenge. But we are all sold on the cause and the belief that flourishing and thriving is not optional. Let me say that again. Flourishing and thriving is not optional. This is what really struck me as I grew up in the ranks of being a psychologist, that sometimes we can get so bogged down in the shame and the symptoms and the illness and think that that's our lot in life, and think that flourishing is too high a goal to reach. But actually, flourishing is not optional. Flourishing is optimal. It is optimal. That's where we want to be. And as a group private practice, the Center for Effective Living 100% believes in that ethos and that philosophy. And so you might find that the videos that I've actually done over the last 3 months don't necessarily focus on clinical disorders or a symposium of symptoms, if you like. And that's not because I don't have the capability to talk about those things. And it certainly doesn't mean that I don't have the clinical orientation to address those things. I absolutely do. That's what our training teaches us to do, and that's what behind the scenes as a clinical psychologist, that's what we do as we review our cases and as we challenge one another to say, okay, do we actually know what the symptoms are, what this means, and what's the best proven treatment method for that. I don't tend to talk a lot about it in my live blogs because I believe that you're a human being. And I believe that you're more than the sum of symptoms. And I believe that your identity is more than the identity or the sum of a disorder. And so I suppose when I've come on here live, it's really to just connect with people who have the common denominator of struggles. Every one of us, whether it's dealing with our body image, whether it's dealing with our worries, whether it's dealing with kind of the more, excuse me, I really struggled today with my cough. But anyway, I'm going to keep going. Every one of us, it's a common denominator. And as a group private practice owner, I consider it a privilege to bring a consortium or a group of people together that are actually 100% believe that flourishing is not optional. Flourishing is optimal. And because I believe that so much, hey Kim, because I believe that so much, we as a group practice behave as a group practice. And that's what I was actually finding myself saying to the person who I was talking to today. I was actually saying that I actually believe that that it's a healthy practice to support yourself with other people. It's a healthy practice to actually do life and do things together. And so the Center for Effective Living embodies that principle, whether we do that as a professional group or whether we do that in the therapy room with you, we're doing it together. So that's my little self-disclosure today. I realized that as I was describing the practice to this person and introducing myself, just how much I actually really believed in that message. So I will leave you with that. Flourishing is not optional. Flourishing is optimal, and it takes more than you. It takes a group. It takes a people around you to help to support you to get to that point. Have a great evening. Bye, Kim.